individuals assessing things for themselves, would you accept that they could actually arrive at many contradictory opinions?
Yeah.
And following the law of contradiction or non-contradiction, would you argue that two contradictory positions cannot both be correct?
I don't know.
So for
It's a difficult
example, if God actually created you without any purpose and it was just left to the individuals, okay, that would be one reality,
Yeah.
or one truth, let's say. The other truth would be that God created you for a purpose and actually informed you of your purpose. Now, if one looks at both of these potential realities, would you agree that both of them can't be correct? One of them is either wrong or both could be wrong, but they can't both be correct. Would you accept that?
I don't. Is religion not all contradictory?
Well, we can get to that. But I'm just saying what I'd like to do is, because I think it's nice to.
I think that it is possible.
Okay, so you think it's possible that God created you without reason, and it's also possible that God created you with reason simultaneously at the same time.
Who is God?
Yeah, this
Well,
is my.
I think I'd like to have the discussion with if that's okay.
I like to join in if
No,
you don't
but
mind.
what it is that
If you like to have a discussion,
the problem
if you
is-
like to have a private
so,
discussion,
with all due
go
respect,
home.
with all due
When you are
respect,
here,
with
everybody
all
can
due
join the
respect,
discussion.
we're trying to have a conversation with the flow of a particular point.
No, okay.
When 4 people or 3 people join, it loses its flow. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying. I don't mean any disrespect. I'm happy. Sir, I'm happy to have that conversation with you, even if it's for an hour or 2 hours. It's fine. But this young lady is very intelligent. I think she's quite capable of making her own decisions and asking her questions.
Issues of who's
Anyway,
intelligent,
so
who is not.
sorry, sister,
You
what was your
just-
name?
Layla.
Layla. My name is Abbas. My surname is actually very similar to your name. Actually, it's Lala. But anyway, look. So what I asked you was, is it possible that God created you for a reason?
When you
As
use
a
word, you have to know the meaning of it. Who is God?
potential truth,
Yeah.
and is it possible to simultaneously God creating you without any reason?
I think there's so many. If religion doesn't, for me personally, religion doesn't have
We'll go home.
a one basis. It can't be all put into the same pot.
I understand. I'm not talking about religion at the moment.
Okay.
I'm just talking about first principles.
Okay.
Can two?
You use a different
Okay.
analogy. Then
Okay.
It doesn't have any.
You're wearing a green and a yellow T-shirt,
Yeah.
right? If I said that T-shirt is pink, and somebody else said it's green and yellow, could both positions be equitable? Could they both be correct?
Well, scientifically speaking, yes, because we see things. We can see things differently. Everyone
Right.
can see things differently.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah, I
So if
do-
somebody's colorblind,
Yeah.
they will see the colors differently.
Yeah.
But what's the reality? What color are you wearing?
In this reality,
Yes.
I guess, yeah,
It's a green and a yellow T-shirt, right?
yeah.
So if there's a deficiency in somebody's ability to assess the colors, then of course they could come up with a different color.
I'm going to say that it is. I'm not going to budge on that it is possible.
I would say, Layla, you don't live your life like that. I would say when you make decisions, you base them on balance of probability, and you go with a probabilistic analysis of everything you do. So today you wore that T-shirt, looking at perhaps possibly what the weather might look like, and you assess if it was raining and it was very cold, you probably would have put a coat on and an umbrella, because you would have realized that even though you haven't felt the temperature and you haven't got wet.
But that's me. But not people. Not everybody lives their lives.
I understand,
like
but that's not the point I'm making. The point I'm trying to make to you is that
yeah, I genuinely believe that reality is interpreted. That's my.
okay, but then you have a grasp on nothing then in life. Absolutely anything. There is no this is not a microphone.
Well, no, it is.
This is not the ground. That's not a tree. Those are not clouds.
But the first question you asked me was, could there be two realities of
Contradictory.
God, two contradictory realities of God? Yes, I believe that, because in reality, is it reality?
So that's a separate issue.
But is it reality?
No, but that-
I can't tell. I can't say
but
if something is if something is contradictory if the sub-basis of it isn't reality.
Okay, so that I also covered that.
Okay.
Because I said to you, either one of them is wrong,
Okay, I believe
or
that
both of them are
I
wrong.
believe that if there is proof and data to back it up, then yes, there is reality. But if you're trying to deconstruct
Yeah.
idea that is not reality based,
Right.
then there can be contradictions in that non-reality based situation.
Right, because you're assuming that it's a non-reality.
Yeah.
But if one of the two is a reality, if one of the two is, if I use the word if, is, then logically one of them has to be right.
Yeah. Okay.
And if there's no evidence for either position, they could both be wrong.
Yeah.
But they cannot both be right. That's the point I'm trying to make to you. Yeah, and I think that's fair, right? Yeah. Okay. So when I asked you about evidence, and I said to you, what type of evidence would actually convince you of a particular religion? The reason why I asked you that is because unless you have some criteria, then when you see something, how would you know that that is something that is evidence or not evidence?
Well, there is like data that is collected by individual humans, or
Okay.
there's data that is collected on large scales,
Okay.
scientifically done with the scientific method,
Okay.
that becomes in proving it either theoretically
Right.
or proving it in reality.
Are there things that are provable without using science?
Yes, but behind those bases of proving them, there lies science.
Okay.
So gravity, you can prove science and you don't need to know anything about gravity,
Right.
and you say,
You can
I
feel
dropped
it, you
this,
can see
that's
it.
Gravity.
Right, okay. So, in other words, somebody saying that gravity exists, this thing falls, without even the theory of gravity being established, that was still a reality, that was still the truth, right? Without evidence, right? Do you believe that your mother is your mother?
Yes.
Are you convinced of that?
I'm pretty convinced of that.
Have you taken a DNA test?
No, I look at spitting image like
Okay,
my mum.
so there's reasons why you believe.
Photos,
Yeah,
you know.
so there's collaborating reasons as to why you believe something to be fairly
We have the
certain.
same genetic disorder.
Well, yeah, so these are reasons, right?
Those are, yeah,
Could they all potentially be coincidences, though?
no,
Potentially.
no,
Why not?
because she is my mother.
But you haven't got evidence. There's no analytical or scientific evidence.
I would say that my parents consummating would be evidence.
No, but you haven't seen that.
No, I don't. Yeah,
There's no science that's analysed that.
Okay. But
Look, the
you're
reason why-
breaking down like a very small thing.
No,
to
but
try
Layla,
and
why?
then
I'm not trying to try.
redirect
I'm not
me.
trying. I'm not trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is that I'm just trying to say, look, we as human beings
Okay.
are overwhelmingly convinced about certain positions that actually have not been established through science or analytical or empirical evidence. That's what I'm saying. So what I'm saying is that
Okay, but there's a difference between that specific evidence. Like, I grew up with my mother. I
Right.
have the same genetic disorder, which can
Yes.
only be passed through genes.
Yes.
It is not a coincidence, unfortunately, the way that genetics work.
Yes.
And you can trace those
Yeah.
genes back, and it cannot happen.
I understand.
If you are not.
do other people have that disorder?
Yeah, that.
So potentially you could be a daughter of somebody else who has that disorder.
Yeah,
It's
I've never
far-fetched.
met anyone with.
Look,
yeah, but
I accept
you're
it's far-fetched.
breaking down something that use a better.
All I'm doing, Layla,
My mother is my mother.
I'm establishing to you that you believe
That
certain
my mother is my mother.
you believe certain things on balance of probability without adopting the scientific method of analytical and empirical evidences. That's all I'm saying to you.
I've given you scientifical, analytical.
No, you haven't.
I said that.
Because you'd have to do a DNA test to prove it.
You also don't need to have to do a DNA test.
I agree.
To prove that you are
I
a parent.
agree.
There is no way that you can have a different blood type
I-
or a different.
I agree
similarity
with
blood
you.
type to your parent.
Layla, I agree with you. This is not an argument against what you're saying. All I'm saying to you is, you mentioned to me
That I believe my mother
that
is my mother.
that it has to be scientifically proven for something to be true.
I didn't.
And-
I said for me personally.
well, I think
I don't think
because
that
your
everyone else should live that way.
because your personal opinion is that it's only provable if it's scientifically backed.
Yeah, that's my
Right.
personal.
And all I'm trying to explain to you is that as human beings, we accumulate balance of probability with things like our mother is our mother, our father is our father, brother is our brother, whatever it might be. I'm just trying to say to you that we haven't taken the analytical or empirical evidence to establish that, but we have good reasons. I'm not saying there aren't good reasons. That's all I'm saying. And I'm not saying that your stance, therefore, is somehow incorrect. It's what we all are like, basically.
Yeah,
so now,
I just think the comparison, you should have used something that is less.
Well, maybe I'm not very good at using comparisons.
Okay.
So that maybe I'm not very good at that, and I picked that one. Okay. Now, the thing that I'm going to ask you now is this.
Okay.
Because you do like science, as do I, right? I think it's an amazing field which tells us how things work, and I think certainly we've done a lot with science in terms of bettering the world, etc. I agree, right? Okay. Now, do you believe that the universe exists?
The universe exists.
Is this real, what you see here?
Yes.
Okay.
I do believe that.
And do you believe that anything that exists that is contingent, i.e. reliant on something else, so it requires certain chemicals, compounds, whatever it might be, it needs to be assembled in a particular way for it to function in the way that it functions, does that require an explanation of where it came from?